But if we ignore these other homes and they are absolutely going to get built, we're not solving the problem. You have to hit everything at every scale.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand, and I'm joined this week by Ilka Cassidy. How are you, Ilka?
I'm doing well, thanks.
And you're back home, and was it warming up over there?
It was. We already had our first heat wave here in Philadelphia last week. It was like 3 or 4 days over 90 degrees. And then all of a sudden, there was a big thunderstorm. And within 30 minutes, the temperature dropped by like 20 or 30 degrees. So it was pretty crazy. So now it's cold again.
Right. Sounds like spring. Meanwhile, I've been down in Queenstown, and there were some frosts down there, a couple of nights of pretty close to 0 degrees, and got to experience an Airbnb, which is always a bit of a gamble. These are quite new homes, but I did come away with some photos of condensation on the inside of the windows, which unfortunately is quite common for homes that are built only just to the building code down here. So I'll probably post those at some stage and talk about my experience going down and being in a cold place with not particularly great houses, which is a bit all too familiar, really. But nevertheless, Queenstown's a beautiful spot, and had a great time there talking about electrification and meeting with a few other Passive House people as well, because it's a bit of a hub for high performance homes, which is something we're going to jump into this week with a guest that you interviewed. So we'll get into that. But before we do, I just want to do a quick shout out to all of our sponsors and supporters, particularly, of course, our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA. Also to our founding sponsors, thanks very much to 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwool, and Zola Windows. And also our champion sponsors, Buizo, Cascadia, Icon, Intus, LG, Prosco, and Source 2050, as well as Zender. And for this week, a big thanks again to Zola Windows. They are a sponsor of the week and help with us producing this podcast, and also everything that happens at Passive House Accelerator, and of course Reimagine Buildings Collective as well. Well, let's jump into this week's feature interview, which was your conversation, Ilka, with Nathan Kipnis of Kipnis Architecture and Planning, and some great thoughts about, well, his tagline, high design, low carbon. It certainly is high design if you want to check out his website, but also check out Next House Alliance. That's Next, and then the German House, HAUS Alliance, which is something that he mentions during this interview. So let's jump in.
Welcome to the Passive House Accelerator podcast, and I'm excited to speak with Nathan Kipnis today. He is the founder and principal of Kipnis Architecture and Planning, with offices in Chicago and Boulder. So hello, Nathan.
Hello, nice to be here.
How are you?
I'm good. Good. Happy to talk to you about all things Passive House.
Great. That's what we're here for. So yeah, let's jump right in. You've been a long-time advocate of high performance design, going all the way back to designing your own solar home at just 22. So what sparked that early interest, and how has your thinking evolved since then?
So it wasn't my house that I did when I was 22.
Oh,
It was
okay.
someone else's home, but I was still in school. So that was interesting. I wasn't actually sure that was allowed, but it was apparently. So what got me sparked about this? Well, when I was 12 years old, it was the 1973 oil embargo. And that was honestly the first time I had seen adults really freak out. I mean, I don't know who remembers back then, but the price of gas went up almost double in a day or two. And here we are again. What comes around goes around, but that really kind of put the whammy on me. And I remember seeing Popular Science, Popular Mechanics magazines, and they had these strange looking houses with solar panels on them. So I thought I want to do that. And that led me to going to school specifically for solar architecture. We didn't really call it sustainable at that time, but that's what started it.
So where did you go to school?
Well, I did go to University of Colorado at Boulder, and they had a very, very good solar program. And got my undergrad Bachelor of Environmental Design from there. And then I went on to Arizona State to get my Master's of Architecture with an energy conscious design emphasis, which was both of those are rather unusual degrees. But I'm glad I got them back when I did. So I was out in the mid 80s with that. And not too many people knew what to do with me. But eventually things started to come into focus and I was kind of ready for it.
Great. So how has your thinking changed since then? Because back then it was the solar passive design, basically. And I mean, Passive House is built upon that idea, but has evolved quite a bit.
Oh,
So how was that for you? How has your thinking evolved? And I know that you have gotten involved in everything around sustainability.
Well, back then there was no building science, or at least nothing like we have now, certainly not Passive House. And it was a lot of rule of thumbs. People, and it was, hey, we're in New Mexico. We came up with these rules of thumb, use them all over the place. And, that didn't exactly work right. But the basic ideas were good, having lots of windows on the south, limiting them on the north, and certainly limiting them on the west. And but as things got more and more scientifically backed up, it changed how we thought. And it changed, the bottom line was we were designing homes that would overheat because of solar gain. They weren't shaded correctly. They just had too much glass. They let too much heat out at night. I was very lucky to have Amory Lovins as a professor along with Hunter Lovins at Colorado. And they showed me plans of their house they were doing in Snowmass. And apparently, is it Wolfgang Weiss? He then saw that, and I think that helped him start figuring out Passive House. So I was really at a unique intersection there. And I think Amory's house isn't exactly up to Passive House standards, but it was a very good first shot for being in the kind of early 80s, which was a long time ago to be doing that. It's evolved a lot since then. So it's gotten much more scientific, much more fact-based, being able to third-party certify, being able to replicate it, and making it work for different locales.
Yeah.
What works in a cold climate doesn't work in a hot climate necessarily, but it's much better now.
Yeah, yeah. And eventually you founded your firm, right? Can you tell us a little bit about Kipnis Architecture and Planning and your firm's tagline, high design and low carbon? And how does that show up in your work day to day now?
Yeah, I thought that was a smart little tagline because that is exactly what we do. I think maybe the carbon part was a little ahead of its time with people not really knowing what that was, but it is exactly what we do. And, over time, we've gotten more and more precise on how we're doing homes. So even when we started, it was still a good bit of it was rules of thumb and trying to figure out how to get it more accurate. But also the clients really didn't know what to make of that. These were primarily single family homeowners. So I think there's a big difference between commercial and institutional in particular, where an institution might want to do it because of for fundraising or because of it's their mission, very different than a developer. And single family is just really hit or miss. You either get people that are really interested in this or they're not. So, at the beginning, when we were doing that with clients, sometimes it was so difficult to explain it to them. We pretty much just did it, and we just put some things in to see how they worked, to get feedback, not making a big deal about it. How do these skylights work for natural ventilation? How does this daylighting work? Are we really getting good shading? And, that's how it started. And then we got a reputation for it. So it was getting easier and easier to talk to clients, but it's very different single family compared to these larger scale projects.
So when was your firm founded? Like when did you start building these passive or almost passive homes?
Well, we were founded in 1993, and I will not say we were doing passive house level homes. So that took a while to get going. It took a while for people to even understand what we were doing. So we did a mix of stuff. I mean, not all of it was heavily focused on that because we just didn't have the demand. But I would say prior to even this, but in 1999, Chicago had the Green Homes for Chicago competition. It was an international competition for a single family affordable home. And we were a part of that. There were 5 homes that were built. And that really got a lot of publicity, a lot of word got out about us, and that really got the ball rolling. So I'd say prior to that, it was real hit or miss. We had a couple clients that were into it, but it was very difficult. Now, and starting from that time forward, the momentum started at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious how you actually talked to your clients back then. As you said, even your tagline with high design, low carbon. I feel like now slowly people are getting up to speed about like what does that actually mean. And now there's a lot of discussion between operational and embodied carbon and all of, overall carbon footprint. But back then, as you said, nobody really knew what that was. So how did you talk about that?
Yeah, I think there was some talk about, hey, we got to walk the walk. And I remember the AIA actually had a poster that said that. And it was a lot about, reduce your carbon footprint. And that was a buzzword that I think a lot of people didn't really understand, didn't have a notion of what that meant. But it was around. People heard it. And I think they associated it with high performance homes. I think operational carbon is really kind of the easy one relative to this. And we were able to do that incrementally. And when I got involved with the 2030 commitment, I was on the original committee in Chicago where we were working on the spreadsheet for reporting back in 2009. That's when the operational side of it was really focused on. And I was on the 2030 committee for way too long. I think they typically roll you off after 3 or 4 years. I was on that committee for 11 years.
Wow.
I moved to the national committee, and then I was the national co-chair for a while. And, towards the end of that, the embodied carbon started really getting focused on. And now it's part of the design data exchange reporting tool for the 2030 commitment. And of course, I think people have a much better understanding of that. There's all sorts of nice tools that are actually not that difficult to use. But I think that embodied carbon still has a long way to go. I think we're just at the beginning of getting that to be adopted by architectural firms and being able to talk to clients about it.
Yeah, I mean, being in it for so long, I'm sure you know exactly how to talk about it by now too. And what's interesting is you mentioned before, especially in the beginning with the single family homes, you would just do it without them necessarily knowing. And I feel that's the notion right now again, where a lot of architects or professionals actually move towards that's just how we do it, and that's what clients end up getting. So
It's funny because we did a project for this one guy. It was a commercial project, small scale, and I didn't bother telling him what I had done, like I said. And then he saw an article that we were in, and he goes, "Oh, why didn't you do any of that for us?" I go, "I did. I just didn't tell you about it."
Yeah.
So,
That's great. What kind of projects does your firm do? So I saw on your website that you do all kinds of different projects, from renovations to commercial and multifamily, and also high-end single-family homes. So what's the difference there for you approaching those projects?
Well, we have done numerous affordable housing projects, but not consistently. Those just come up occasionally. They're always a challenge. They're definitely doable to do them at, in a high efficiency level. Your options just get more limited. You have to be much more focused on it. We do a lot of higher end homes, and I am not apologetic about that. In my mind, I don't let them get off the hook just because they got money. Okay. It's like there's so much focus on affordable housing, the missing middle. These people are going to do these homes, and those need to be done to this level more than anything. The first thing we do talk about is the size of the house, because that is where it gets out of control. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding exactly what they need and not, stoking their fantasy of having too big of a house. But if we ignore that section of the housing market, we're never going to make this work. We have to hit everything at scale. And I also like the fact that because they have a bigger budget, we can try out stuff that we might not be able to on affordable housing. And then, I mean, I hate to use Tesla as the model. Used to be a good word, not anymore, but the notion of starting at high end and then working your way down, there is some logic to that about testing out and trying these things and getting them to pay to get the price down. So that is something that we work with, and we do higher end homes, and we try and really make them perform really well. And above and beyond that, I think the resilient design aspect is very important and appeals to everyone. And so that's certainly a thing that we bring up quite a bit. And if you look at the intersection of sustainability and resilient design, it's a big overlap. If you're doing a resilient home, it's generally speaking going to be a very high performance home.
Let's go back to your comments about the single family high-end homes, because I do know that there's often some kind of a perceived tension between like focusing on high-end homes and addressing affordable housing, because we all want to address affordable housing, right? Because that's a lot of people live in those buildings, and everyone deserves a healthy, well-performing home. But you're saying that we can't let the high-end homes off the hook. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, just in my mind, if all we do, and like I go to these conferences, I go to the FIAS conference, I go to the AIA, there's a lot of talk about affordable housing and about the missing middle, and all of that is true. I mean, there's nothing wrong about that. And as a matter of fact, it's a huge problem. But if we ignore these other homes and they are absolutely going to get built, we're not solving the problem. You have to hit everything at every scale. So it's just one of the ones we look at, and we happen to be very good at doing this and helping them. And you know what? There's just not a lot of architectural firms that are helping higher end homes be super efficient. What I don't want to see is some Hollywood rock star throwing solar panels on a McMansion and thinking they're doing a good job. That's not a good job.
Yeah. No, I happen to agree 100% with you, and I work a lot in the high end single family home market as well. And what I found is, yes, you talk to the clients and talk to them about organizing the house well so that you don't necessarily need so much space, but they do have certain requirements to the project. And I always found that it's a little hard for them to give up those dreams, right? And they're going to build it no matter what. I think it's our responsibility then to build these homes as efficient as possible. And what's also interesting about that, and you mentioned that before, is that we learn a lot, right? So a lot of times those homes are very complicated. They're not just the simple boxes. There are certain requirements that the homeowners have in terms of program, in terms of shape of the home. There's things that you have to face and figure out that are not quite easy, but they're able to pay you for that service, right?
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think the thing is, how do you get them to understand this? How do you get them on board with it? And I do think talking to them about resilient design is kind of the gateway into this. And talk to them about, hey, do you want the power to go out while you're at home? Don't you want the power to be going all the time? Well, then we get the batteries and the solar panels. And don't you want, like, if the power goes out, the interior should stay really well conditioned. That's how we get a really tight envelope and really well insulated and good air, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to meet them at their level and talk to them so that they want to do this and that they think it's a great benefit, which it is. The resilient design part is really good. And then, like you were saying, we learn a lot. I mean, the mechanical systems, the smart home systems are very complicated, very complex. And we're able to, every time we do a project, we learn more and more about it. I know lots of different ways to do it. And so we can look at a site, look at a situation of a client and get a system that works just right for them and is the most efficient one. And so they don't even realize it, but they're using very little power. And I mean, we make them know that. We definitely don't hide this like I used to. Now we make it a big deal for them. And most of them love it. And I'll tell you what, when they have the big party, when they move in, they show that mechanical room off like it's a trophy room because it's pretty cool. There's some of the people there, usually the guys, take their beers down there and go, holy cow, look at this. So it's kind of fun to do that. And if someone wants to, keep up with the Joneses as far as sustainability, I'm all for that.
Yeah, and I found that a lot of those clients are actually big tech geeks too.
Yes, yeah, that's why the smart home stuff is so fun with them. But, it's funny with the smart home stuff, usually they talk about it in terms of audio, video, and, security, and then shades and this and that. And it gets down to the last thing, which is monitoring the solar panels and the HVAC system. When I talk about it, it's opposite. I go, hey, this thing does the solar panels, it does the mechanical. And I mean, everyone's got a good AV system at that point. That's not really the thing, but I want to really make sure that they're able to see how the house performs.
Yeah. So yeah, I found that those clients are typically very interested in the energy model as well, right? They don't just want to see the results, but they want to see kind of, okay, what does what?
That would be our best client. Yeah. Not all of them, but boy, I'll tell you, the ones that are like that are easy.
Yeah, yeah. Let's also talk about the Evanston's first passive house. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, actually, about a year and a half ago, I think we finished it. So the client came to me and in a very interesting way. So I'm a member of the Evanston Bike Club, and there's 15 people that ride in the club or plus or minus. And I get a phone call after a ride. Someone goes, oh, I was on the ride. And I wanted to talk to you about Passive House, about doing a home. And she didn't actually say Passive House at that point, but she just said about designing a home. And I go, she gave me her name. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't recognize the name. Oh, I'm the really tall redhead. So she used to be the founding CEO of the Chicago Sky basketball team. And we had just started riding together in that club. And she didn't know anything about Passive House, but she knew that we were very involved in high performance homes and everything. And that was our first one. We had not done one prior to that. Our best clients are the ones that realize if we can do A and B, we can do C. And she knew that. And she was fascinated with how Passive House worked. The more I explained it to her, the more interested she got. And so she's totally committed to it. And it was a fantastic project. She was involved, just like she is on the basketball team, in getting this done. She would call for huddles when we were on site. It was wild. She was great to be that involved. We love when owners and clients are that interested in it.
That's great. So, yeah, tell us a little bit more about the house.
Yeah, so, smartly, she did not want a huge house, even though this was in a neighborhood. It was in a listed historic district. So the homes were all from 1885 through basically 1925 in that time frame. And this had to be reviewed by the Evanston Preservation Commission, and they're very thorough on their reviews. They want the homes in that neighborhood to fit in, but they don't want them to be just kind of copies of old homes. So they leave it to us to make it fit into its time period. So there was a whole thing about how we were going to design for that. But going back to the size of the house, so this is a 2,800 square foot home. The homes in the neighborhood are 5,000 to 10,000 square feet, but we still had to make it look big. So the front of it looks fairly large. It's not very deep, and it's L-shaped with a one-story section on it. So it tries its best to fit into the neighborhood size, but it's really less than half the size of most of the homes there. It was quite a process. Again, I knew what Passive House was, and I had to kind of bring the rest of the team up to speed. So Next House Alliance is this group that we've put together with a really great general contractor, really great interior designer, excellent landscape architect, and probably the best home integration firm in the whole region. And they knew sort of what Passive House was, but really had never delved into it. So there was a bit of learning for them as well, but everyone totally ate it up and got into it. And it turned out to be a great house. It's performing great. We're always looking to make it a little better, but I can describe the style if you want.
Sure.
So because it's a modern home, because it's of this time period, I just thought it was crazy to try and do even a remotely fake house. Because this historic neighborhood, when you walk through it, you should know what you're looking at. You should look at a house from the 1920s and realize that's the real deal. And so we wanted ours to express that it was a modern home, but it still had to relate to these other ones. So the alignments of the overhangs, the proportions of the windows, the massing, there's a large mass with a small mass next to it, the entries offset on the large mass, just like all the other ones. The one thing it did not do is it did not have 7 steps up. We designed this for aging in place. She said, "This is it. This is my last house." So we wanted to make it work for her for a very, very long time. So it has 3 steps up. And if we ever needed to, we could hide a staircase, an exterior ramp, actually, not a stair, but a ramp into the landscaping. It had a lot of features like that where we were thinking really hard about how she would live in this house. It's 3 bedrooms, which are upstairs, but on the ground floor, there's a very good size office that she can utilize as a bedroom. The bathroom on the first floor is set up for aging in place. It's got a 0 threshold. So, and then along with all the Passive House items, or, in conjunction with those, great natural daylighting, great natural ventilation. I know Passive House wants to stay pretty tightened up most of the time, but when she can open the windows up. But the natural daylighting is really amazing. We got a light shelf in there that bounces the daylight off of the light shelf up onto the ceiling, re-reflects it into the space. Great materials were used in there. The kitchen is completely made from recyclable products and is recyclable, and just is a really fun kitchen, really great. And it's the centerpiece, right? When you walk in, that's what you see. Very rare to do that someone wants their kitchen to be the focus, but it's a piece of art. It's really beautiful. And one last thing I'll tell you is the fireplace is not a fireplace. It's a linear humidifier with the correct colored LEDs. So of course, if we're doing a fireplace in a carbon-free home, why would we make it a real one? So, and
Yeah.
she was on board with all of that. Not having done a passive house before, I wanted the builder to, have the best chance of getting this to work. And so we went over all sorts of videos on how, what were the differences compared to a normal house, compared to even a high performance house, and what they needed to do. And this was the first project we had done a liquid applied membrane on the exterior. And I remember once I came out and I saw it all finished, and you could kind of see the nail holes telegraphed through that. I said, before we get to the next step, I want you to hit every one of those again, because we're just never going to have a chance to do this. And we were a little nervous, to be honest, when the first blower door test was done, but we were off to a great start. We were already better than Passive House. I think it was in the upper 0.4, 0.48 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And it ended up at, I think, 0.35. So for his first shot at a Passive House, I was very happy with that. Came out really great. Yeah. The coordination between the team members was superb. And that's the hallmark of Next House.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit more about Next House. So is that an alliance that you kind of formed for this particular project, or is that something that existed before?
So I was involved with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. That was something that started about 2010 or something. And I was involved in it in, I think, 2016 or 17. And I basically, it's like a small MBA class, not officially, but pretty much. It's a very business oriented thing. And the focus from my standpoint was how to do larger projects that were much more, even higher sustainability levels than we had done in the past, and how to do that. And it became obvious that a coordinated team was the way to do it. And not only that, but we also have sponsors that support our mission and allow us to utilize their backing to promote this. And I just think it's a really great idea. I think to promote homes that are ultra high performance, sustainably wise, as well as resilient, designed for aging in place. And the other great thing about it is when people put together a team as a homeowner, like, okay, I'm going to do this house. I have to go find an architect. I have to find an interior designer, et cetera, et cetera. There's 3 interviews for each of those, very time consuming. And then they don't know what kind of team they're putting together. I mean, people can have different goals, different egos. We don't like egos at all. We like everyone just kind of being focused on the project. And I think it's a really good advantage for a client to streamline that process. Each of us has, as a minimum, like 25 years of experience. Some of us on the team have 45 years of experience. And so it's a really well put together group. Very happy with the team.
What are items or things that when you started practicing were, hard to do and are just standard now? I'm sure there's some, right? Some solar
Oh
panels.
yeah. I mean, triple glazed windows used to just be next to impossible to talk anyone into it. They were so expensive. They were hard to find, hard to specify to some extent. And what's interesting is they've gotten cheaper because they've ramped up production, but also because there's so many large screen TVs that the glass technology for lightweight, big sheets of glass has really come down in cost, primarily, or one of the reasons is because of that. So we're seeing people, they're no longer exactly 50% more than double glazed. They're a little bit less now, and I think they're going to continue to come down in cost. But occasionally, like just the other week, we were looking at this 1880s house in Evanston where our office is, and it has no insulation in the house currently. And one of the rooms has it's a corner room with tons of glass, 12 windows. And I was in there when it was 5 degrees outside, and it was like 52 degrees in the office. And in the rest of the house, it was only like in the low 60s. And I just was like, you know what, whatever we do, absolutely, these 12 windows have got to be triple glazed. I mean, there's just no other way you're going to be comfortable in here. So I think even when we do that, we pinpoint where some triple glazed windows are going to go. I think people appreciate that we're not necessarily forcing them to do everything. And we say, look, let's price out what it costs to do the whole thing. It's your call. But for sure, let's do this because of the performance. So, I think they know because of our experience that when we tell them stuff like that they understand that and they appreciate that.
Yeah. So is there anything that you would tell our younger professionals, our listeners? Because I do know that a lot of times there's discussion amongst the younger professionals just trying to find those clients that actually want these passive homes or high performance homes. And I don't know, how do they find them? How do they talk to people about it? As someone who's been in this industry, in this field for a little longer, what would you say to them?
Well, I guess there's a couple things. One is, I mean, I started this at the beginning of my career and I stuck with it. And I did it when there was no one talking about it. I mean, I remember I would go to parties and start bringing this up, and I was just talking right through people. No one even knew what I was talking about. But over time, it worked out. I would say you got to stick to your guns on this. But the other thing I would say is if you just focus on the efficiency, you are missing the boat here. This is why it's high design, low carbon. That to entice people to do it, you have to design great homes, aesthetically good homes. And, if you look at the AIA, they have the framework for design excellence. So in the past, what one considered a great house was one that was aesthetically great, like it looked good. Now, the framework for design excellence, there's 10 categories. They're about sustainability, resilience, wellness, equity. The house has got to perform. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so do not just focus on the sustainability part. Like really try and figure out how to capture the whole thing. And that's, I think, what makes our firm unique or very not common. There certainly are other firms in the country that can mix this up, but that's the thing that gets clients. That's the thing that makes great projects. When I started, the idea was, let's do a project that's really great. Let's get an award. Let's get publicity. Let's get more clients. Let's get an award and just keep going like that. And so that's what we've been trying to do. And I think it's really, really important. It's how, again, I don't like using Tesla so much as an example, but that's how they have become such a big car company so quickly, is because they had an aesthetic. They had lots of different aspects that made the car great. And that's what we try and do with houses and with other projects. Is it's not just that it performs well, because that is just not going to get you clients. You have to, just like the framework for design excellence, there's a lot to cover. If you can hit them all, you're gonna do well.
Yeah.
And we're counting on young people.
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
all teed up
absolutely.
for you. We got the technologies here. Everything's in place. We just got to change some politics a little bit, and we can do this.
Yeah. So how about your firm? Is there anything that you still have that are goals for your firm that you would like to reach or change in the future?
Well, I mean, I feel really good about where we're at with housing, but with houses, but we've started to do some more and more multifamily and some relatively large scale, not huge, but I would like to move more into that. And, just like we were talking at the beginning, multifamily is obviously much more efficient. In the last couple of years, we've done rehabs of some multi-story apartment buildings. We're currently doing a multi-story condo building, a 5-story one, and we're doing some mixed use. So, I mean, that's more interesting right now, but I like all of it. And I think it's fun. Also, we've done a number of projects where we've articulated by celebrating a client's birthday and having the sun hit a certain spot in the building, like it's their birthday monument. And to me, a lot of stuff that most people do is stuffed into the walls or hidden in the basement. And I just like celebrating that. So you can put a piece of art there, it lights up on your birthday,
Nice.
whatever, just something fun to do and have fun with it. That's really a good goal.
Yeah, that is. Well, thank you so much for your time talking to us. It was definitely really interesting just to hear your perspective, especially in terms of high performance or high-end high performance homes and the clientele that you have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
That was Nathan Kipnis of Kipnis Architecture and Planning. And I love that tagline, as you mentioned, Ilka, high design, low carbon. And I also really like that history going back to the 1970s oil crisis, which is very timely and topical for right now. I've mentioned this to a few people that it's a very similar situation. In fact, that first oil crisis was the reason why insulation was introduced as a requirement into the building code for the first time, and became part of the building code here in New Zealand in 1978 as a direct result of the sudden realization that maybe oil is not infinite, and here we are again learning similar lessons, and there's a newfound interest in energy efficiency. And I think it's a really interesting look back, as Nathan did, looking back to people like Amory and Hunter Lovins, and looking at those very early super insulated houses and passive design. And it's interesting thinking about a world before Passive House existed, because that is that time when people were just sort of figuring this out. You couldn't just go and buy a heat recovery ventilation system off the shelf. People were basically making this stuff up, and we've come a long way since then. And it's great to hear from people like Nathan, who has built this practice from the start by being very clear about what he wanted to do, and just his time has kind of come as the years have gone by, and now more and more people can see that what he does is a good thing to be doing. So yeah, really great stuff. Really enjoyed that. What were your takeouts?
Well, I think it's funny that you said it's hard to imagine a time before Passive House, because it's so true. Now it's just so clear what you have to do, right? With air tightness and the insulation. And yeah, it just kind of works and it's obvious, but there was a time where it wasn't, that people were trying to figure out how to do this better. So, and there is a lot of errors too, right?
Yep.
There is a lot of issues with mold and
Yep.
all of that. So there's a huge learning curve that this movement had to go through, and that Nathan witnessed in part. So I thought that was really interesting talking to him from a perspective of like, yeah, kind of long time development into the right direction, and what he's done and what has changed through all these years. But for me, I think what was really interesting was just his perspective on these high-end homes, because I think, and we talk about it a lot of times, we focus on multifamily, which is totally reasonable, of course, and low-income housing, again, totally reasonable. But there is a huge amount of single-family homes and also high-end homes, and people kind of build what they want to build. So they better build better, right? More efficient. And I think the idea that we can actually take advantage and see it as an opportunity, that people basically invest into the development of details or materials on these high-end projects for for those to then become more available, or the details that have gotten figured out become more available. So I think the idea that these high-end homes are, they have to be held accountable. They shouldn't just waste energy or more than they have to, in a way, but also to see that as basically a catalyst to move into the right direction and bring that to the more mainstream market and low income housing and multifamily housing. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, because it's not exclusively high end,
No,
is it?
no,
It does quite a
no.
range.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, some of those are quite stunning, quite amazing. And I guess that it also speaks to, I mean, there's some issues around, I mean, we can get into debates about the ethics of, or the sensibility of, and Nathan mentioned it, you don't want to just have mansions with solar panels stuck on it and ridiculous sized buildings. But there is something to be said for selling good homes and that recognition from us who tend to be a little bit idealistic about wanting to spend lots of money on windows that are really good performance and have lots of insulation, all the invisible things. But we also need to recognize that people really like beautiful things as well and functional things, and that's ultimately what will win awards, but also attract people's attention. Is the classic form versus function. You got to have beautiful homes that also work well, and it's the beauty that will attract people, and also help sell the idea of what a good home is or a good building is, which I think we can learn from people like Nathan, where he's been successful in selling what he does.
And what's really interesting about this too is that within, if you design a home like this, the additional cost of the more expensive windows or more insulation is just such a small percentage of the overall budget, right?
Yeah.
If you design a small, like lower budget home, the upgrade for all the windows and the insulation takes up a much higher percentage. So it's kind of a no-brainer to do this on these high-end homes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you're spending $100,000 on your kitchen, then a few $1,000s on a ventilation system is going to disappear.
Exactly. Yeah. So why not?
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much. Check out Kipnis Architecture and Planning, but also check out Next House, which he has a link to. So that's nexthousealliance.com. House spelled Haus, with some really great information about that initiative and some pretty nice pictures as well. Thank you again to Zola, who is the sponsor of the week for this week, and lots of stuff going on. We don't have Zach here this week to give us the rundown, but you can check out all of the activities over at the Passive House Accelerator. And of course, if you haven't already, then jump in and join Reimagine Buildings, because that's where a lot of activity and support and community is to keep the discussion going. Thank you very much, Ilka. We'll be back again next week on the Passive House Podcast.